Is it possible to walk away from a lease? On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're going to talk about the steps you need to take to get out of that contract. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. Today we're talking about the walk-away lease. And can a driver truly cancel the truck lease and walk away with no further financial obligations? As you may have guessed, it's usually not that simple, and here's why. So when you sign the contract for a lease, there's usually some clauses in there, and I'd be hesitant to call them hidden clauses because they're in black and white. But the challenge is a lot of times, drivers that are especially new to this, they're not really sure what they're reading. But here are some of the hidden type clauses that you might watch out for as you sign a new lease. Is there some kind of penalty for early termination of the lease? Are there balloon payments that may come up? Or is there any kind of requirement for truck maintenance that you hadn't taken into consideration? So a lot of times, I'm just going to tell you that when a trucking company leases you stuff, they're going to protect themselves, right? The last thing that they want to happen is to get you into a truck lease where they give you a piece of equipment to start your own business, make money, but they don't want to ever get that piece of equipment back where it's been trashed, there's physical damage to the truck, you turn it in with bald tires, maybe half the switches in the cab aren't working right, that type of stuff. So they're going to put clauses in the lease to protect themselves from that, at least minimum expectations that when you do turn that equipment back in, that you've got to have that truck in a certain working order, certain working level. Debt accumulation is another one that happens. So there'll probably be a clause somewhere in the contract that talks about debt accumulation. Many carriers want you to set up an escrow account. It may be for performance, it may be for maintenance, something like that. So they're trying to help you save money, put some money aside for things like maintenance as you need it down the road. One of the things that I've experienced, I've seen at least, is the owner ops that do it well, they put a lot of money away, they use it as a savings account. When they take the truck in for regular service or ready for a set of 8 tires or something like that, they've got the money sitting there. They're very disciplined with their money and their savings, running their business. The guys that don't succeed typically are the guys that struggle with money and able to put it away. They spend it as fast as they can get it. In fact, they spend more than they make sometimes, and sometimes that maintenance escrow ends up in the negative. One of the things that's going to happen is if you walk away from a truck or you turn that truck back into your company and you have a negative escrow account, they're going to withhold your last several paychecks if they can to try to cover that debt that you still owe. They're not going to let you just walk away from that. That is money you spent and money you owed. Now, they acted like your bank for a little while, your financial institution, and tried to support you and work through that. But at the end of it, you're not going to be able to leave them holding the bag. That is your responsibility. And we mentioned the truck condition too. So there will certainly be a clause in there about what kind of condition the truck must be in if you turn it back in. And it's no different than if you turn it back into your carrier or if we're leasing a truck from one of the manufacturers. When we lease trucks for a period of 4 years, and if our intent is to turn it back into the dealer at the end of that 4 years, there's certain minimum stipulations. That truck has to be in certain type of condition to do that. Otherwise, they're going to charge us back for that. And I'm guessing the carriers or the contracts that you're looking at are probably going to have something very similar into it. So you can't just run a truck into the ground and turn in a truck that's been beat down and broken and half the things don't work or it needs a lot of maintenance and all the lights are on in the dash and the bald tires and all that stuff. So that's something you got to figure out. If you get to the point where you want to walk away from your lease, you have to be in good financial standing with the company, and the truck also has to be in good working order before you turn it in. Now, if you can do that, then I think, yes, you can truly walk away from a lease with no other obligation. The struggle is, for a lot of drivers, is they're not there. They don't do it. It's usually the maintenance side that gets them upside down. So I'm going to tell you a story about a recent driver of ours. His name was Dan. leased a truck from us through a lease purchase program. So the lease purchase means he bought a truck that was 4 years old in our fleet, and he was actually buying it. So every payment he made, each week he made payments to us, he was gaining equity in that piece of equipment. And at the end of 3 years, he was going to own the truck, get the title. It was going to be his. The struggle was he did start to have some maintenance issues. And as the finance part of it started stretching him thin, it's easy to skip the maintenance, right? If you already know you're upside down in the hole with your maintenance escrow because this dang truck keeps nickel and diming you to death, then it's easy just to, I'll skip this PM and I'll run it a little bit longer because I know I don't have the money in my maintenance account anyway. So skipping maintenance is a horrible idea, by the way. And one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And pretty soon you find out you've dug yourself a pretty deep hole. Dan was also a poor communicator. So he was, he'd call in when he wanted a load, but when dispatch or maintenance or safety, anybody else was trying to get a hold of him or something, he wouldn't answer the phone. He didn't return calls. He might be one of these guys that slips into the terminal late at night and slips back out after the office staff is gone so nobody sees him. And I'm guessing he was worried about having a difficult conversation with somebody in the office about where he stands with maintenance or maybe a safety issue, something like that. But, you know, all this stuff starts to add up on the drivers. And if this is their normal behavior, they're not going to be successful with the lease program. We had actually, as a leadership team, we had gotten to a point, we had some discussions about Dan. And as we come up on the first of the year, one of the things we do is we look at all our owner-operators, our lease drivers, and see if we're going to renew contracts. So we do an annual renewal on the contracts with everybody. And Dan was one of the guys we kind of felt like, boy, this guy's really upside down. We've had several discussions with him about some things he needs to change and do differently to be successful and kind of get back up on top of it. But Dan wasn't doing that. You know, the behavior change would last for a week and then he'd kind of slip right back into his old ways. And all of a sudden we couldn't get a hold of him. He wouldn't talk to us, things like that. So as a discussion with maintenance and operations, it just says, I don't think it's in our best interest to continue this lease with this guy. So let's let him know. We don't want to surprise him with anything. So we had the intent of giving him at least 30 days notice so we could have some discussions about how we're going to work out of this. And the goal with that would have been, okay, we're not going to renew your contract. We don't want to be left with a truck that's in really bad shape. And at the same time, we don't want you to walk away with a whole bunch of debt and stuff either. So how can we work through this together? So a lot of times what might happen in this case where he was buying the truck, it's an agreement to let's go ahead and sell the truck, bring it back in, let the shop kind of recondition it the best they can, get it in good working order, safe order. And then we'll take it to an auction or sell it outright, whatever that looks like. The proceeds from the sale of the truck will pay off the debt that he owes us. If there's anything left over, the driver actually gets that. If we sell the truck and it doesn't sell for enough to cover all the debts, then usually the company kind of ends up, holding the bag on that. Now we could turn around and hopefully have a conversation with the contractor and say, hey, we didn't quite cover the debt. Here's what's still owed. And legally, by the contract, he owes us that money. Now, is it worth the company going to chase him and trying to get that money back out of him somehow? The company has to make that decision. If it's a small amount, you might just forgive it and walk away from it and just be done with it. If it's a large amount, maybe you do decide to figure out how to collect on that. But the odds are, if the driver couldn't make a go of it as a lease contractor or an owner-operator, it'll be hard to ever recover that money. So that's one of the risks that companies take when they run these lease programs is you're going to have people that are very successful with it, continue to lease new trucks through you, maybe even grow a small fleet by doing that. And then you're going to have a handful of people that are not very successful at it. And you probably end up kind of holding the bag, so to speak, on some of those things. So back to the story, Dan, we had that conversation with him at least 30 days out, and he agreed. And in fact, he had kind of was thinking the same thing. He was going to give notice, and we had kind of a termination date in mind, was mid-December. And we were all kind of on the same page in agreement. We were going to work through it. And then all of a sudden, the truck needed something minor in the middle of one of his last loads, and it went into a dealership for repairs on the road over a weekend. Well, come to find out, we get a call from the dealership that the truck's ready, it's repaired, ready to be picked up. It was very minor, only a few $100s to fix whatever was wrong with it. So that wasn't a big deal or big concern. But we find out that Danny has already started a new job and in fact was in orientation of his new company when he was still technically and physically under a load for us. So he walked away from this truck, the trailer, the load, and just kind of left us hanging. So anyways, if there was ever a way not to end a relationship with an employer or carrier, that would be it. He's not off the hook by doing that. If, we're going to get the truck back, the trailer back, everything's been recovered, of course. We're going to go through the truck and we're still going to move forward with that plan as far as selling it at an auction to try to recover our costs. But the big concern was the load itself and the risk that he took or left us with, basically. We're flatbed. So, what was on that trailer? Was it something that couldn't be out in the elements or couldn't be out in the elements very long? Was it tarped, not tarped? Even if you're a van reefer guy, you run the risk of cargo theft and things like that. He had dropped the trailer at a truck stop and then took the tractor to the dealer, and we didn't know that they were separated. We thought the truck and trailer were together at the dealer, and come to find out that wasn't the case. So anyways, it was just kind of really a rough ending to this particular lease with this driver. And if like I said, if there was a way he could do everything wrong, that's exactly what he did. And unfortunately, we're not vengeful. We're not going to try to go after him and make his life miserable. But the matter of fact is, he did abandon a truck under a load, so that will probably land on his DAC report and follow him around for the next 10 years, right? It's unfortunate that he's already working for another company and they haven't checked his background with us yet. They have 30 days to get that done. So a lot of times the carrier will get the driver in orientation, and then once they get him through orientation, they really have 30 days to go do those required background checks. They're going to find out after the fact of what he did. And had they done the background checks up front, maybe they would have decided not to hire him. He's a risky character, unfortunately. And while he was a super nice guy, man, his behaviors are something different. And he may not be somebody that, most companies would want working for him. So there's that part of it. He left us hanging, not only with the truck and, the extra recovery cost to send drivers out to go pick it up a few states away. We exposed ourselves with a load potentially, so we've got to work through that. It just got really ugly at the end, and it came down to because of the lack of communication. We were already in a good place with the understanding that we weren't going to renew the contract, and Dan was ready to move on and try something else. So it didn't have to end like that. It could have ended in a pretty positive way, but unfortunately, he chose to make some poor decisions and not communicate with us. So. Back to the real question is a walk-away lease a real thing? Yes, it absolutely is. And again, if you follow the rules on the contract you signed up front, then I think you can walk away from a lease. If you decide something's not working out, something's changed in my life, I can't be a driver anymore, I need to get off the road. But you need to go back and work through that contract. The best way to do that is to have that conversation, get your carrier involved and have those conversations. Listen, something's changed. I'm not going to be able to drive anymore. I need to be home every night, whatever that looks like. How can we get out of this so we both walk away okay? And I have no doubt that your carrier will help you and walk you through that. Now, if you do the shady thing and you just walk away with a lot of loose ends, it's probably not going to help you in the long run. I have a feeling that's gonna follow you down the road. How do you avoid it? How do you avoid the issues? Know what you sign. Take the time up front. So many times drivers are so excited and anxious about getting into a lease, especially if it's your first one. They don't really read the contract. Those things can be, man, I don't know. I bet ours is 10 or 13 pages long. It's a lot of lawyer talk. It may be stuff that you don't understand, and that's okay. Have somebody help you. I've sat through or looked through enough contracts that, I can help you put that in layman's terms and figure out what that means so you understand it. And I think you got to do that. Understand that there's financial obligations. You can't run up a bunch of bills and then think you're just going to walk away from it scot-free. There's got to be a solution to that of how you're going to pay those debts off. So that will be in the contract as well. And then probably the best advice is, being an owner-operator is not easy. It's not the same as just being a company driver and all of a sudden you make more money and the paychecks get bigger. There's a lot of responsibility there. If you feel things are starting to go sideways, or you notice that you're getting upside down in maybe some of your escrow accounts or getting behind on the maintenance type stuff, go have a conversation with your company. Go talk to them about it. They would much rather help you dig back out of that, come up with a creative idea to do that, than they would have this ending like we did with Dan here. So anyways, that's the best advice. Walk-away lease is absolutely a true thing, but it's up to you whether you're successful at that or not. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time.